When I was a teenager, I remember being entranced by a cartoon which was published in the newspaper my parents took. It was entitled Love Is, and each instalment depicted a cute cartoon girl and boy illustrating one possible way of ending that sentence. Love is bringing her a bunch of flowers just because. Love is rubbing his feet when they're aching. Love is cooking the meal that she likes the best, even when you don't. There are many, many ways of ending that sentence, because there are many, many ways of expressing and experiencing love. And I would say that the same approach works if we were to swap the word love for life. Life is beautiful. Life is difficult. Life is not all a bed of roses. Life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. Life is a sexually transmitted disease which is invariably fatal. Life is a journey, a puzzle, an enigma, a gift. Human beings have always wrestled with and argued about the right way to live. And a lot of the angst that we feel about this has to do with social expectations, the way that we are accustomed to people behaving and the ways in which we pressurise one another when somebody doesn't quite fit in. But social mores change over time and place. 6 months ago, if I had met somebody for the first time in a formal setting, I would have put my hand out with the expectation that they would shake it, and I would have been rather upset and offended if they hadn't. But then came coronavirus, and in early March we had 3 new people turn up to the Bread Church at Warwick, and each of them, when I approached them, put out their hand to shake mine, and it was me who declined. I do hope they weren't offended by that. And now, well, I can't imagine shaking anyone's hand for quite a long time. One of the ways in which we cope with the complexities of life and human relationships is by making rules. And we've certainly had a lot of those in these past few months. We've struggled to adapt to them, and when we keep up with all the changes, and we've wondered how to respond or what to think when some people seem to be ignoring the rules and other people seem to be taking them to the nth degree. The trouble with rules is that they can't possibly cover every single situation or occurrence, and because of that they need to be interpreted. When God offered Solomon, who had just been made king, anything he wanted, offered him one wish, if you like, he asked for wisdom. The wisdom to know how to interpret and apply the law. The wisdom to decide between competing priorities, to discern the best way forward for all of the people that he was called to rule over. And in asking that, he was implicitly acknowledging that there were going to be plenty of times when he wouldn't know what to do for the best. I'm sure that we've all had times like that, not least during this pandemic. When the way ahead is unclear or confusing, our readings this week offer us encouragement and hope. Our gospel reading ends with Jesus saying that every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like the master of the house who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old. What's he talking about? Well, scribes were scholars of the law. They had read and studied and pondered how to understand and apply the law, the Hebrew scriptures, what we tend to call the Old Testament, for years and years. That's the old treasure. But the kingdom of heaven, the intimate personal knowledge of God, the relationship with our Creator, which Jesus speaks of, is the new treasure. It's like the wisdom that Solomon asked for and received, but it's so much more as well. It's the ability to read the times, to understand the way that things are changing and moving, and to react accordingly. I don't know about you, but I feel that would be a wonderful ability to have, and I'm well aware that I have plenty of scope to grow in that regard. So in these rapidly changing and moving times, where do we turn? Well, here are 2 thoughts for you to take away and to ponder for yourself. The first comes from the parables in our gospel reading. The mustard seed and the yeast show us the potentially enormous power of small things. The habit of reflection or prayer, taking a moment or 2 during the day to pause, to allow our mind to still, that can be incredibly powerful because it opens up space for new insight, which might be just the thing that we need to see our way through the problem that we've been wrestling with. It might allow us to have an insight and understanding into the circumstances of the person we've been struggling with, to have compassion for them, and that in turn will enable us to respond to them in a more gracious way. Small things, small actions make a big difference. A word of encouragement or welcome, a smile at a stranger as we pass them on the street or in the shop, although you'll have to use your eyes from now on. A phone call, a text, a card, just to tell someone that we're thinking about them. These things can add up to quite a lot. Each act on its own seems insignificant, but if we make them our daily habit, they can add up to a great deal. The second thought comes from our reading from Romans. Do you sometimes feel as though you don't know what to pray for or how to pray? Do you sometimes wonder whether God is even listening, whether there's any point in praying at all? Well, you're not alone in that. But the promise of Romans is that God's Holy Spirit is helping us when we don't know how to pray. God is praying for us and in us, even if our own words and actions seem inadequate. The truth is that our own words and actions will always be inadequate and imperfect. But they're still precious to God because we are precious to God. Our trying, our desiring to please God, pleases God in and of itself. We try and we fail, and sometimes we fail to try, but that won't stop God loving us. Nothing will stop God loving us. Nothing can cut us off from God's love. It's there even when we don't feel it. Remember the power of small things. A word of prayer here, a kind action there, a moment's stillness to invite the Spirit to speak. These are the small things of our daily lives which add up to one big thing, building the kingdom of heaven here and now. Remember the love of God, which is always with us, whether we're aware of it or not. God's love is amazing. God's love is eternal. God's love is all-embracing. God's love is never-ending. God's love is yours and it's mine forever.